Let me ask you something. If your best friend called you tomorrow and said to you, hey, I quit my job and I started my own business, would you congratulate them? Probably. I would too. But then I'd ask one more important question. Did your mindset quit too? Because leaving a W-2 doesn't automatically create an entrepreneur. Welcome back. I'm Law, author of Enunciate Your Needs, Practices for Presence, and Consent. Today, we're going to talk about one of the biggest shifts I've ever experienced, and it's rather recent, so this is a fresh topic. Not learning business, but learning to think like a business. For I have been in corporate 20 plus years. I've worked with large Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies to small startups. And I've always been commended for my work ethic. And I'm not knocking it by any means. My father is military. My mom is daughter of a military man and an organized mother. I had a very, very great upbringing and operating system programmed into me. But when shifting into the entrepreneur space, that mindset had to shift. And it started with changing my operating system. For years, right, you perhaps, were trained to think like an employee. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's simply a different operating system. For employees often ask, when do I get paid? When do I work? What is my shift? What are my responsibilities? What are my benefits? What does my manager need, right? Those are appropriate questions for an employee. But here's the shift. Then one day you start an L.L.C. And if you're not careful, you'll bring your employee mindset into your business. And that's what I did. And I appreciated learning the experience. And that's why I'm sharing my experience with you beautiful people. Because an L.L.C. doesn't change your mindset. You do. Now the questions become different. Instead of asking, when do I get paid? You ask, is this client profitable? Difference, right? Instead of asking, what does my boss need? You ask, does this client respect my time? Instead of asking, how do I keep this job? You ask, is this engagement helping my company grow? You can feel the authority. You can feel the difference in that reframing of questions. Instead of asking, what if they don't like me? This was a big one for me. You ask, is this the highest and best use of my company's resources? Notice the power shift. Now for my business owners, what's been the hardest mindset shift for you? Please share your experience in the comments. We need you. Now, I want to make this clearer. Your client isn't your employer. I want to make that clear again. Your client isn't your employer. See that mindset shift? Because once you start recognizing that, accepting that, everything changes. Like my LLC has clients, not bosses. That's different. Clients hire us. We don't belong to them. We serve them professionally, respectfully, but we don't surrender our identity to them. And this is where my framework, my book, Enunciate Your Needs, enters this conversation. For communication becomes everything, right? One of the greatest mistakes new entrepreneurs make is assuming. You know that saying, right? When you think of the word assuming, if you assume you're making a beep out of you and me, just spell the word and you'll figure it out if you weren't aware of that saying. But it's very true when it comes to the entrepreneur space. And that's why communication is important. So what are some of the assumptions an entrepreneur can make? An entrepreneur can assume that clients understand expectations. An entrepreneur can assume that payment terms are clear. An entrepreneur can assume that timelines are obvious. One can assume that silence means agreement. No, do not assume anything. enunciate your needs and put them in writing. That's why contracts are amazing. Invoices, scopes of work, payment schedules, communication expectations. Not because you distrust people. I want to also make that clear. It's because clarity protects relationships. And professionalism protects relationships. So all I'm encouraging you to do is to be professional while you CYA. Now, this is also where my latest book, Consent, enters this conversation. Because business is built on consent too, right? You agree to the work, consent. You agree to the payment, consent. You agree to the timeline, consent. They agree to the expectations. Mutual agreement, mutual understanding, mutual respect. That is consent. And here's the beautiful part. Just because someone offers you work doesn't mean you have to accept. A contract is a choice, not an obligation. Consent matters. Patience is also involved when it comes to entrepreneurship. Oh, entrepreneurship teaches patience. For you won't build a business overnight. You'll build systems. Those systems will come with and will require relationships, trust, reputation. One conversation at a time, one client at a time, one fulfilled promise at a time. And remember, patience is regulated trust. You're not waiting, you're building. And if you're really careful, and if you really care about your business, you're going to be mindful and careful as you're building. You would also do yourself a service not to cut corners, as the saying goes, not to skip steps. Have good record keeping, because all of that enables you to do your business and to do it well. Now, presence matters here too, because entrepreneurs make decisions every day. Fear says, take every client. Presence says, is this aligned with my business? Fear says, say yes. Presence asks, should we? Fear reacts. Presence observes. That's leadership. Now, in corporate, many organizations have what's called HR, or human resources, right? Things change when you move into the entrepreneur space. It's like human resources versus you being a CEO, managing member of your business. Here's another shift. Employees often rely on HR to define policies, expectations, performance, boundaries. Entrepreneurs become their own HR department. You decide how clients communicate, how invoices are sent, how disputes are handled, how work is accepted, how companies show up. That's your responsibility. And that's not a bad thing, because in that responsibility comes freedom. But if one has been so used to just being able to rely on HR, you can see why and how that mindset shift needs to happen, but also why it's important to happen, and why someone may be waiting for things to go right because they're so used to, you know what, I'll just contact HR, I'll just write a complaint. Things are different. But as that saying goes, if you want different, you got to do different. That's the mindset shift. Some entrepreneurs fire themselves every week. One bad client and suddenly they're questioning their whole business. I've been there, but that's not what we want to do. Sometimes you don't need a new business. You just need a better client. What's been helping me in my journey? I have begun creating what's called a client scorecard, right? When I was in corporate, especially when I was selling, I would go by that 80-20 rule. And I would have my 20% of my highest clients that I would give 80% of my time to. And I would scorecard my clients by, probability of buying. Or if we had a new item, I knew which clients would just take it with no questions asked. And I had my list of my clients that I would have to convince. And it was all relationship building. But I would scorecard my clients, and then eventually I just knew the rhythm. I didn't have to always document everything. Well, after now working in this entrepreneur space and creating this mindset shift, I realized, and with the help of ChatGPT, my virtual assistant, Just saying. The suggestion was given, hey, you need to also create your own scorecard. So I connected to two worlds, and that's what I began doing. And I started asking different questions. Like, not do they like me, talking about the client, but does this client communicate well? Do they respect deadlines? Do they pay according to our agreement? I had to pause there because that has been one of my biggest lessons in this entrepreneur space. Working in corporate for so many years, one thing I never had to worry about was if and when I was going to get paid. Even in sales, I would have a base, and it may have been a low base, but I knew I was always going to get something on my cadence, weekly, bi-weekly. In this entrepreneur space, enunciating your needs, asking for a schedule, I need to understand when my payout is due to this work. Like, you have to be clear. And you are now managing your portfolio. You are now managing your business. And then you're managing your operating costs, you're managing your bills, you're managing your life and your responsibilities. It's a change, but it's a great change because it does promote everything that it promotes. And ultimately, many go into entrepreneurship for that freedom. So as we learn, we teach. Each one teach one. I just had to get that off. Whew. Other questions that I ask now in my scorecard: do they honor my expertise? And that one, I had to check myself, because if a client is hiring me, contracting me to do this and this and this work, just because I have other work outside of that scope that I feel can and they will benefit from, I had to put that back in my pocket and be like, law, they're not asking you to do that. They're contracting you to do this. Just do that and do it well. If they ask you to do outside of that scope, I may pull out a few here and there, but it won't be overused or overdone, because that's what you're not contracting me for. If we want to start doing more and the relationship seems like this client falls well in my scorecard and I want to perhaps extend this contract, let's have that discussion. I would love to be on your board. I would love to help your leaders become better leaders and better managers. But there is something associated to that, because this is a contract, this is a business. Other questions that I add to my scorecard: do I enjoy serving them? Right? There's where the freedom comes in. Yeah, you want to get paid, but do you actually enjoy doing what you're doing? Like, when a person's a W-2 employee, sometimes it's like, oh, I got to go to work. The case of the Mondays, people go into the entrepreneur space because it's a different mindset. This is what you're choosing to do because ... So that question lands for me. Do I enjoy serving them? And then a nice follow-up question: is this relationship sustainable? And this is where erotic intelligence comes in, right? Because if you're in any relationship and it's not sustainable or it's toxic, we like throwing that word out, I get it, but same thing can apply with business. Would you want to continue? If I want a 2-year contract, but after 6 months, I can't wait for this year to be over, for it to be rebid again, and I withdraw. Sometimes, many times, it's not about the money. If the environment, if the relationship is not sustainable. Choices. And being an entrepreneur, we get more choices, but choose correctly and choose wisely. Because every client costs more than time. They cost attention, energy, creativity, opportunities, right? As an entrepreneur, if you are investing your time and energy into a client that's not profitable, the relationship is not sustainable, they're not communicating well with you, and quite frankly, you're stressed out, that client is costing you more than what you're getting paid from them. Scorecards matter. Now, there's also a civic connection when it comes to this mindset shift, because even how I view government work, as I'm learning, cities aren't rescuing my business, they're potential clients, right? Like, school districts aren't favors, they're organizations with needs. And businesses, as an entrepreneur, our job is to what? Solve needs, find solutions to needs. Schools have needs. Federal agencies have needs. Now, federal agencies aren't unreachable. Their customers also looking for solutions. You just got to know how to connect with them. But once I started shifting my mindset Again, everything changed and things stopped looking like they were out of my scope, out of reach. And one realizes, wow, they're right in my backyard. They're right downtown. I walk by their buildings every day. Why haven't I just walked in and introduced myself? Because they have a need that I may be able to solve. Everyone wins. Entrepreneurs don't chase approval, they solve problems. The LLC mindset isn't about making more money. It's about taking greater responsibility. Responsibility for your decisions, responsibility for your calendar, your reputation, your communication, your standards. Here's a good one, your peace. Ooh. Freedom without responsibility becomes chaos. And I'll be the first one to admit, when I was younger, I thrived in chaos. Oh, talk about walking on water. I navigated through chaos. The more chaos, the almost in some ways, the better it was for me to navigate and just do my magic. Made more money, managed well. As I get older, that freedom without responsibility becomes chaos. No, thank you. No, thank you. Every now and then, it's like riding a bike. But every day, no, thank you. Responsibility creates sustainable freedom. If you are thinking about starting a business, just register your LLC. Develop a new mindset. Because your business will never consistently outperform your mind in the way you think. The day I stopped asking, how do I keep this client happy? And started asking, is this relationship healthy for my company? Everything changed. Not because I cared less. Because I finally began to lead. Your LLC isn't just a legal structure. It's an invitation to think differently, to lead differently, to choose differently. Because the moment you become responsible for your business, you also become responsible for your freedom. If you own a business or are thinking of creating one soon, let the community know what has been the biggest mindset shift you've had to make. Drop your comment below and let's build together. Peace.